Every rose has its thorn, and Alexander Graham Bell is no exception. What do you think of when you hear his name? You may think of his invention, the telephone, and the positive impact he had on the world through this and other inventions such as the photophone and the graphophone. He gave plenty of roses and positive impacts, but he has thorns as well. He hurt people. And that is what we'll be learning about today, through his personal life, his impact on the deaf culture, and several of his inventions. As someone who was born with significant hearing loss, I was surprised to learn that Alexander Graham Bell had a great influence in how the world perceived deaf culture. A deaf and hard of hearing expert by the name of Jamie Burke stated in the article Alexander Graham Bell and Deafness for verywellhealth.com on March 23, 2020, quote, "Some historians point to this as his legacy just as much as his inventions. However, his reasons behind those suggestions have an origin in a darker agenda, and his view of the deaf ushered in an era of seeing that population as less capable and stigmatized, a valid method of communication and education," unquote. Alexander Graham Bell positively and negatively impacted the world. He was born on March 3, 1847, to Eliza Grace Simons, who was deaf, and Alexander Melville Bell. By the age of 12, it was evident he had an innovative mind. As a child, young Bell displayed a curiosity about his world and had an impact on his neighbor, Ben Herdman. Ben's family had a flour mill, and they accepted young Bell's first invention, a simple dehusking machine that was put into operation at the mill and used steadily for years. Then, young Bell attended the Royal High School at Edinburgh, Scotland, but surprisingly left school at age 15 without graduating because he didn't appreciate the curriculum. In 1863, Bell's father encouraged his son's interest in speech by taking him and his brother to see the rudimentary Mechanical Man, which simulated human speech. This automaton was developed by Sir Charles Wheatstone, based on the earlier work of Baron Wolfgang von Kempelen. After Bell obtained a copy of von Kempelen's book, he and his older brother Melville built their own automaton head. While his brother constructed the throat and larynx, Bell tackled the more difficult task of recreating a realistic skull. Eventually, the brothers built a remarkably lifelike head that could speak a few words. The boys were successful in getting it to speak its first word, Mama. In 1872, after settling down in the United States, 33-year-old Alexander Graham Bell established the Boston School of Vocal Physiology and Mechanics of Speech, even though he didn't have a degree. He influenced deaf people in this school by encouraging them to speak. Here he met Mabel Hubbard, a deaf student whom he worked with in 1873. Even though they had a 10-year age difference, they were married on July 11, 1877, and had 4 children, as stated by Britannica.com, published on February 27, 2022. Although Mabel supported her husband, there were disagreements regarding oralism, which was the controversial concept where deaf people were taught to read lips and use verbal communication instead of using sign language or ASL. Even though Mabel wanted deaf people to learn to speak, she didn't believe in eliminating a language. Previously cited source, Britannica, has stated that as a professor of vocal physiology and mechanics of speech, Alexander Graham Bell had a big impact on deaf culture. Despite Mabel's protests, Bell led the way for schools to incorporate oralism in 1880 after attending a conference in Milan. The suppression of a unique language was then taught for 100 years, until ASL was proven to be its own language. Alexander Graham Bell supported this because he wished for the deaf people to be like his deaf mother, who could effectively communicate her needs. As a hearing-impaired person, I was shocked to learn that my culture had to fight for the right to speak their own language. Despite his good intentions, this led the deaf culture to despise Mr. Bell, which is understandable. They were not allowed to speak their own language. In fact, Alexander Graham Bell stated in the paper upon the formation of a deaf variety in the human race in 1884, quote, "The production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world." He feared contamination of the human race through the reproduction of deaf people and supported human breeding efforts to weed out diseases and disabilities, which is known as eugenics. Being a deaf person myself, I am not particularly fond of this aspect of his life. However, I do believe he made many good contributions to society with his inventions, which we'll go over next. As stated earlier, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Additionally, in 1877, he started the Bell Telephone Company, which is now known as AT&T. Some of his other inventions include the photophone, the precursor to modern cell phones, which used moderated light to transmit speech, rather than the wires used by telephones. This device is similar to the modern cell phone, which uses photonic impulses or light to transmit messages. Furthermore, he created the graphophone, which recorded speech and led to modern-day listening devices. Today, hearing companies use another one of his inventions, the audiometer. This is used to help identify and measure the severity of hearing loss in people and assist in planning the next steps for communication. For me personally, this enabled me to adjust my hearing aids to a level that allows me to hear, communicate, and participate in everyday life. Alexander Graham Bell once said, quote, "A man, as a general rule, owes very little to what he is born with. A man is what he makes of himself." And Bell made himself a man who affected the entire world. We have seen that as we looked at his personal life, his impact on the deaf culture, and some of his inventions. He supported a degrading view on deaf people, but his inventions positively impacted all people, and we can see that today, for I am here giving you a speech on someone who changed my life. I thank you for listening, and I encourage you to look more into his personal life, the deaf culture, other inventions he played a role in, and most importantly, give grace freely, for we are all imperfect. Every rose has its thorn.